For the last decade, RLP has strived to ensure fundamental human rights for forced migrants in Uganda.
And even I don't have the reason to go back to my country.
Today, RLP assists over 1,000 clients per year and employs over 65 staff members working legal aid and counseling, education and training, research and advocacy in offices in Kampala, Gulu and Moroto. 10 years ago, RLP was just an idea by Dr. Barbara Harrell-Bond while working with a team of researchers on a book about refugee protection in Uganda and Kenya. It all started in a room with a green door at the Makerere Institute for Social Research, MAISA, famous for their Tuesday seminars. Convinced that there was a gap in forced migration studies and advocacy in Uganda, Professor Joe Oloka Onyango, then Dean of Faculty of Law, provided the first space at the Faculty of Law.
For me, it was very clear that refugees were a group that was unrepresented actually, because at the time there was no organization dealing with the rights of refugees. There were many humanitarian organizations, but none that focused on their legal rights. The Refugee Law Project offered an opportunity for students to become more involved in practical dimensions of doing legal counseling, legal advocacy, and legal aid generally speaking. And I thought that this would be a good entry point for students at the faculty to begin to engage with actual practice.
I was given $30,000 US and told to get on with it. Equipment-wise, I was left with one trusty old Starlet, which had been Dr. Barbara Harrell-Bond's car while she was here with the research project, and some very enthusiastic staff. The challenges were how to provide legal aid in an efficient manner, how to cope with the growing numbers. I mean, the numbers grew so fast when people started to hear that we could offer them any kind of advice. A lot of the people who came were in a desperate condition, actually. They were hungry, some of them too hungry to even tell us their stories. The other challenge was that I don't think at the beginning, those of us who started had the emotional equipment, perhaps, to be listening to the kind of stories we were listening to day after day, apart from offering legal advice. In order to ascertain what kind of legal advice they needed, it was important to hear their stories and to record their stories. And the magnitude and the horror of some of these stories was quite overwhelming.
RLP moved to its current location in Old Kampala in 2001. Zachary Romo took over as director in the same year. The goal was to keep the office accessible to all refugees.
So what we adopted was an open door policy, to be very open to them and to be frank about what we have, what we can do, what we cannot do. Right from the beginning, particularly when I came here, and I think beginning with Pamela, the idea was that the refugees was the purpose for why these offices were created, and to defeat our logic to erect barriers to them to have access to us. So the primary goal was to make sure that their access was made as easily possible for them as we can humanly make it. In itself, for us, was another of the solution and part of the invisible resources that can actually minimize tension between them. Sometimes people just need to be received and to be loved and to be shown that they are human. And when you do that, many of the issues melt down and the answers come more easily. But when you put a lot of bureaucratic steps, then you draw a line between yourselves, and there's immediate room for suspicion, and that your client think you are hiding something from them, which is not usually the case. So when you explain to them we don't have the resources, and you're driving a four-wheel drive with the intercoolers and all this, and they're seeing you taking coke and soda and It makes no sense, you see. But if they are free to come, they know you are taking black tea, they want it, you can share it with them.
Wakimbizi wako hapa wanafurahi na Refugee Law Project kwa sababu Refugee Law Project inawasaidia zaidi sana kumashauri. Wakansala wako hapa wanawasaidia sana. Unaona kama mkimbizi anakuja kwa mwingine na hajue kia kufanya, ya lazima ni kumpatia kwanza ile counseling kusudi akili yake irudie fasi moja vizuri. Kabisa tunashukuru, wanatupokea bila uchaguzi, ukwe Mnyarwanda, ukwe Msomalia, ukwe Msudani, ukwe Mkongomani, kila mtu unakuya wanakupokea.
In 2003, RLP began confronting issues of internal displacement alongside its ongoing work with those who have crossed international boundaries. This expansion coincided with the height of displacement in northern Uganda as individuals and whole communities fled the violence resulting from the struggle between the Lord's Resistance Army and the government of Uganda.
Just in our backyard, that's basically in northern Uganda, we had anything up to 1.2 million IDPs at that point in time, and this is about 2003. And on the other, the fact that displacement in the region as a whole was starting to become an issue which is quite interlinked with refugees. So in Uganda, we needed to get a sense of the reasons why people get displaced. That is the causes of the conflict, the effects, the impacts, before starting to get a sense of what is going on with the IDPs themselves, what sorts of protection concerns do they have, what sorts of human rights issues are coming out in that context. That study was eventually published as working paper number 11, which was entitled Behind the Violence, Causes and Consequences of the Conflict in Northern Uganda. Ever since that moment, our work on with IDPs went in all sorts of different directions. But that particular piece of research also gave people the impression that the project was a project specifically conducting research on conflict, which was not the case. We were doing conflict research as a methodological entry point into understanding issues of displacement.
In 2006, RLP welcomed a new director with a broader vision for the organization. Having worked in Uganda and the Great Lakes region for close to a decade, Dr. Chris Dolan led the transformation of RLP from an institution focusing exclusively on refugees and IDPs to one capable of linking peace, justice and forced migration issues.
We've seen a lot of changes. It's a broadening of our scope. So we're still structured in the same three departments that we had 3 or 4 years ago. But within those departments, so within research and advocacy, we now have a much wider range of activities, much wider range of research issues. We've moved from focusing purely on refugee and conflict issues into looking at transitional justice and into a more diversified way of working. So we now have much more emphasis on communication strategies. We have the whole process of using video for advocacy is something that's coming in the last 2 years. The use of the public media to disseminate certain public information messages. So all of those ways we've really diversified quite a lot.
How is it that we got to where we are? How is it that we got to the point where our country, our history has been deliberately falsified to such an extent that we are at war with each other?
So the Refugee Law Project has been really closely involved in discussions about national reconciliation for at least the last 4 years, I would say. But probably even before that, as a project, we got a name for our research on conflict situations around Uganda, and in particular a research paper which was produced in 2004, which I'm led to believe, and I have the strong impression, really helped to shift the way in which people thought about the war in northern Uganda. In 2006, we set up our own initiative called the Beyond Juba Project, which is a joint project together with the Human Rights and Peace Centre and the Faculty of Law, and has always been about, as the title suggests, going beyond Juba, going beyond the talks at Juba, and broadening the lens of what people need to look at if they want to bring about sustainable peace in Uganda. So in many respects, it's our sort of overall take on Uganda is as a country which has some fairly deep wounds in the legal aid and the psychosocial side of the work, which is our, if you like, the core of our work with refugees and asylum seekers. We've also gone from having, a one-size-fits-all sort of approach, where you came into the office, asked to see a lawyer, and that was what happened. And then once you had that lawyer, you were with that lawyer for the rest of the time that you were coming to the Refugee Law Project. And that created a lot of bottlenecks and was also not very satisfactory for the staff themselves who were having to work in that way. So in the last couple of years, we've shifted increasingly towards having much more specialized projects. So we now have a children's rights project, we have a sexual and gender-based violence project, we have a deportation project, we have a project looking at durable solutions. And in all those ways we're becoming more specialized but also more skillful in the way that we operate and in the way that we address particular key issues.
It was first realized that there was need for psychosocial workers to assist their clients, most of whom have suffered traumatic experiences and require psychosocial support in order to be able to speak to the lawyers very well.
At time when there is very little work, modal works for all of these purposes.
We came up with that program because we discovered many refugees come from, in Uganda here, they come from different countries. So we had to embark on training them and teaching them English. And because whenever they came here, they couldn't even express themselves. They didn't know how to talk to the officials in the office of the Prime Minister or UNHCR. They were there and they were relying only on interpreters who could even distort their testimonies.
When I came here, I don't know anything. The lady of teacher of John is the one who assisted me to teaching for English courses, everything. But I know how can I tell my own everyone for today. Before I don't know. Even if I need water, I don't know how can I ask, but today I know how can I tell my problem.
Under our education and training department, we also have training for duty bearers because we know that it is very difficult to do advocacy with people that do not know what you're talking about. So there is tailor-made courses for police officers, for immigration officers, other stakeholders who work with refugees and asylum seekers. But also we started an internet cafe to fill the information gap that the clients have. Many of them would like to know what is happening in their country of origin, as well as communicate with friends and relatives from countries outside Uganda. But it's also important because many refugees are now taking courses, long-distance courses in universities that are outside Uganda, so they use the internet cafe to do their courseworks.
The realization that durable solutions must lie at the core of forced migration advocacy has driven RLP to both explore the root causes of displacement in Uganda and strategize around creative solutions. Such insights led to the development of special programs such as Changing the Lens. This program aims to reverse the negative stereotyping of Karamoja region through research and policy work that accurately reflects the complex reality of life in Karamoja and examines the factors which have compelled sections of the population to flee the region. In its 10 years, RLP has come a long way. Today, it is not only recognized as one of the leading providers of services to forced migrants in the Great Lakes region, but it has also established a reputation for its cutting-edge policy and research in related fields including transitional justice, gender, and access to justice. And in 2011, the RLP will host in Kampala the conference for the International Association for the Study of Forced Migration.
Really, now we're here celebrating our 10th anniversary. We don't fit that description anymore.
It is a reflection of our success as an organization that we are known today as the Refugee Law Project, the Center for Justice and Forced Migrants.